At 10:17 on a Saturday night, I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a trash bag, when my girlfriend walked in with 6 people I'd never met and announced that 2 of them would be sleeping in my guest room. She didn't ask. She didn't even lower her voice, like she knew she was pushing it. She just set a bottle of tequila on the counter, kicked off her shoes, and told everyone to make themselves comfortable. The strange part was that we'd already had this exact conversation 3 days earlier. I had agreed to let her use my house for her sister's birthday dinner. 12 people. Food, drinks, music, whatever. The only things I asked were that nobody smoke inside, the party wrap up by 10, and nobody stay overnight because I had to leave early the next morning for a work site 2 hours away. She had looked me straight in the face and said, "Of course. It's your place." Now, one of the strangers was opening my refrigerator. Another was walking upstairs without asking, and my girlfriend was looking at me like I was the one making things awkward. I told everyone the party was over. She laughed. Not nervously. Not because she thought I was joking. She laughed like I was a little kid trying to give orders at the adult table. That was the moment I realized the problem wasn't the party. It was that she'd stopped seeing my home as mine sometime before I noticed. I'm 34, and at the time my girlfriend Lauren was 31. We'd been together a little over 2 years. I live outside Columbus, Ohio, in a small house I bought from an older couple when interest rates were still reasonable and people weren't offering their firstborn children for ranch homes with unfinished basements. It wasn't fancy. 3 bedrooms, a detached garage, and a backyard that turned into a swamp every spring. But it was mine. I work as a project manager for a commercial electrical contractor. The job is mostly schedules, budgets, safety meetings, and getting blamed when a shipment of conduit goes to Cleveland instead of Cincinnati. I make decent money, but I didn't grow up with much. My dad drove a city bus. My mom worked the front desk at a dental office. They helped when they could, but nobody handed me a down payment. I saved for 6 years. Lauren knew that. She rented a 1-bedroom apartment downtown and worked in marketing for a regional restaurant group. Her job involved social media campaigns, menu launches, and events. She was outgoing in a way I've never been. She could walk into a room where she knew nobody and leave with 3 invitations and somebody's family recipe. That was part of what I liked about her. I'm not antisocial. I just don't need to turn a trip to Home Depot into a networking opportunity. For the first year, we worked well together. She pulled me out of the house more. I made sure she ate something besides appetizers and cold brew. But after she started spending more weekends at my place, little things changed. She'd invite someone over, then tell me after. She'd give people tours of the house, including my office. She once let her coworker take a Zoom call from my bedroom because, according to her, it had the best light. I told her that bothered me. She said I was weirdly territorial. I should explain that Lauren didn't technically live with me. She had a key because she stayed over 2 or 3 nights a week. She kept some clothes in the closet and had a shelf in the bathroom. That was it. She didn't pay toward the mortgage, utilities, groceries, or repairs. I never asked her to. We talked about living together eventually, but I wanted us to make a clear decision instead of letting it happen one tote bag at a time. Lauren called that overthinking. I called it not discovering 6 months later that someone had quietly moved into my house. The birthday dinner was for her younger sister, Megan. Lauren asked about it the previous weekend while we were at Costco. She was pushing the cart and casually adding enough food to supply a youth soccer tournament. Megan's apartment is too small, she said. Can we do her birthday at your place? I asked how many people. Like 10. That usually means 15, so I asked again. She admitted it might be 12. I said yes, but I needed everyone out by 10 because I had to be on a job site near Dayton at 7 Sunday morning. She agreed immediately. Then she asked if 2 people could stay over. I said no. She gave me a look and said, "You have 2 empty rooms. They're not hotel rooms. It's one night." And I'm saying no. She dropped a tray of mini cheesecakes into the cart harder than necessary. The rest of the shopping trip was quiet except for her, asking whether I needed 60 batteries. I assumed the issue was finished. Friday night, she came over to decorate. She brought plastic tablecloths, string lights, paper flowers, and a framed picture of Megan that looked like it belonged at a memorial service. We laughed about it, and the tension seemed gone. The party started Saturday at 5. At first, everything was fine. Lauren's parents came. Megan showed up with her boyfriend. A few co-workers arrived. My friend Eric came because he knew Megan through a rec league softball team. I grilled burgers. Lauren handled drinks and music. People were having a good time. Around 8, I noticed Lauren pouring shots for a group I didn't recognize. I asked who they were. She said they were friends from work who had stopped by. There were 4 of them. That brought the total to 16. I didn't make a scene. There was enough food and nobody was causing trouble. At 9:30, I started cleaning. Lauren noticed and told me to relax. "I'm leaving at 5:30, I said. We know. By 10, her parents had left. Megan was helping me carry dishes into the kitchen, and most of the original guests were putting on jackets. I thought we'd pulled it off. Then Lauren disappeared. I assumed she was upstairs getting something. 10 minutes later, headlights swept across the living room. The car door slammed. Then another. Lauren opened the front door before anyone knocked. 6 people came in carrying alcohol, backpacks, and 1 rolled-up sleeping bag. That's when she announced the sleeping arrangements. I put down the trash bag and said, "No." The room got quiet. Lauren smiled at me like she was trying to manage a difficult customer. "They already came all this way. I told you nobody was staying. They can't drive. They just got here." One of the guys looked at the floor. Another opened the tequila. I told them they needed to leave. Lauren's face changed. "Can you not do this in front of everybody? I'm not the one who invited people to stay." After I said no, she stepped closer and lowered her voice. "You're embarrassing me. You put yourself in this position." She stared at me for a few seconds, then turned to the room. "Just ignore him. He gets like this when he's tired." That sentence did more damage than the whole party. Not because it was insulting, because of how comfortable she sounded saying it. Like she'd explained me away before. I asked her to come into the hallway. She refused. I told her again that everyone needed to leave. She crossed her arms. Then she said, "I basically live here. You don't get to treat me like a guest." I looked around the room. Nobody moved. So I said, "You don't live here. And right now, you are a guest." Lauren grabbed her purse and told everyone they were going somewhere else. On the way out, she leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "You just ruined this." Then she left with all 6 of them. I locked the door, finished cleaning, and went to bed around midnight. At 2:43 a.m., Lauren called. I didn't answer. She called again. Then she texted, "We need a ride." I wrote back that she should call a cab. Her reply came immediately. "Wow. Good to know who you really are." I turned off my phone. At 5:30, I left for Dayton. By the time I came home Sunday afternoon, Lauren was sitting on my porch, and she wasn't there to apologize. Lauren stood up as I pulled into the driveway. She had sunglasses on, even though the sky was gray, and she was holding an iced coffee, like she'd been waiting long enough to deserve compensation. I parked, grabbed my work bag, and walked toward the house. She didn't say hello. You left us stranded. You had 6 adults, 3 cars, and phones. People had been drinking. That's what cabs are for. She followed me inside before I could decide whether I wanted her there. The kitchen still smelled faintly like tequila and barbecue sauce. Lauren looked around and said, "You cleaned without me." It was an odd complaint. "You said you'd handle it," I said. "Then you left. Because you kicked everybody out. At 10:30. After I said the party ended at 10. She took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, but she didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed. Megan cried. That surprised me. I had texted Megan that morning to apologize if the argument had made her uncomfortable. She'd replied with a thumbs up and said she had fun. What did she cry about? You made her birthday about control. I pulled out my phone and showed her Megan's message. Lauren barely looked at it. She's trying to keep the peace. Then she told me her coworkers thought I was hostile. She said one of them had driven 40 minutes. She said I damaged her reputation. Every sentence turned the situation slightly until I was no longer a homeowner who had set a basic limit. I was a controlling boyfriend who had humiliated her in front of important people. I asked why she'd brought them over after we agreed nobody else was coming. She said the original party felt boring. I asked why she'd told people they could sleep at my house. She said she assumed I'd be reasonable once they arrived. That was probably the most honest thing she said. She hadn't misunderstood my boundary. She had planned to make it harder for me to enforce. I told her that. She rolled her eyes. You make everything sound manipulative. Because that was manipulative. No, it was spontaneous. Spontaneous is buying concert tickets. This was you deciding my answer didn't count. She sat at the kitchen table and folded her arms. Then she said something that made me stop. You're acting like this house has nothing to do with me. It doesn't. Her mouth opened slightly. I didn't say it to hurt her. It was just true. She hadn't chosen it. She hadn't paid for it. She hadn't helped renovate it. We weren't engaged or married. Lauren looked around the kitchen like she was seeing evidence against me. I've spent 2 years here. You've spent weekends here. I've decorated. You bought 2 throw pillows. I helped you pick the paint? You said gray. She got up so quickly the chair scraped the floor. You know what? This is why people think you're cold. I asked which people. She said, everyone. That's a word people use when they don't want to provide names. I didn't push. She went upstairs and started collecting her things. At first, I thought she was leaving for the day. Then she came down with a duffel bag. Are we breaking up? I asked. She gave me a look like the question offended her. I need space. Okay? That answer bothered her more than an argument would have. She stopped near the door. You're not even going to fight for this. You said you need space. I didn't say I wanted you to agree. I almost laughed, but she looked serious. I told her I wasn't going to chase her out to the driveway and make a scene. She said that proved I didn't care enough. Then she left. For the next 3 days, I heard almost nothing from her. One text Monday morning said she'd arrived at work. I hadn't asked. Tuesday night, she sent a photo of a restaurant we liked with no message. Wednesday afternoon, she asked whether I was ready to talk, like an adult. I said yes. She came over after work. This time, she was calmer. She apologized for inviting people without asking. I apologized for telling her she had nothing to do with the house in front of the argument, even though I still believed the point itself. For about 20 minutes, it seemed productive. Then she said we needed to discuss the larger issue. The larger issue was that she felt insecure because I wouldn't put her name on the house. I thought I'd misunderstood. We weren't engaged. She didn't live with me. She'd never contributed to the mortgage. Still, she said that after 2 years, she needed proof I was serious. I told her commitment wasn't the same as ownership. She said that sounded like something a lawyer would say before a divorce. I asked whether she wanted to move in. She said that wasn't the point. It seemed exactly like the point. Then she told me several of her friends believed I was keeping her at a distance so I could remove her whenever it became inconvenient. I reminded her that she maintained her own apartment because she liked living downtown. She said I was using facts to avoid feelings. That one almost got me. I asked what she actually wanted. She wanted a written agreement that if we broke up after she moved in, I would reimburse her for any money she had contributed to the household. That sounded reasonable. Then she added that the agreement should also give her a percentage of the house's increased value. That did not. How much? I asked. She said 25%. I stared at her. She explained that she'd be contributing emotionally and helping improve the property. I asked whether the 2 throw pillows were included in the appraisal. She didn't appreciate that. We argued for another hour. Eventually, she cried. Not loudly. Lauren rarely cried loudly. She sat at the table, pressed her fingers under her eyes, and said she was tired of feeling like a visitor in the life of the man she loved. That got through to me. I started wondering whether I'd been too rigid. Maybe I'd made the house into a symbol, without realizing it. Maybe asking her to follow rules in a place where she spent so much time had made her feel temporary. I told her I was open to discussing a real plan for living together. A fair division of expenses. A timeline. A cohabitation agreement. Maybe engagement later, if things continued going well. She nodded. We ended the conversation on decent terms. For the next week, she was almost unusually thoughtful. She asked before inviting anyone over. She brought groceries. She offered to pay the electric bill. I declined because she still wasn't living there, but I appreciated the gesture. Then Eric called me. He asked whether I was alone. I said yes. There was a pause. Then he said, I need to tell you something about Saturday. He sounded uncomfortable enough that I sat down. Eric said Lauren had been talking about me during the party, not normal relationship complaints. She'd told people I controlled her money. She'd said I refused to let her move in because I wanted a maid without responsibility. She'd also told 2 coworkers that we were practically engaged, and that the house would be half hers soon. I asked why he hadn't said anything earlier. He said he thought she was venting. Then one of her coworkers contacted him through Instagram and asked whether I was always that aggressive. That bothered him. He also told me the 6 people who arrived after 10 hadn't been invited at the last minute. Lauren had planned the after-party days earlier. She had even told them I would probably complain, but that she could handle me. I thanked Eric and hung up. Then I called Megan. I didn't accuse Lauren of anything. I just asked whether she had been upset after the party. Megan went quiet. Finally, she said, Lauren told you I cried, didn't she? Yes. I didn't. That answer was bad enough. What she said next was worse. Lauren had been telling her family for months that I was planning to add her to the deed once she moved in. Apparently, everyone thought it had already been discussed. I was still on the phone with Megan when I heard a key turn in my front door. Lauren walked in carrying 3 cardboard boxes. She smiled and said, "I figured we should start making this official." I ended the call and looked at the boxes. One was labeled shoes. Another said bathroom. The third had nothing written on it, but I could see framed photos sticking out of the top. Lauren set them beside the stairs. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Moving a few things over. We didn't agree you were moving in. We agreed to make a plan." "A plan isn't the same as moving in." She stared at me for a second. Then she looked at the phone in my hand. "Who were you talking to?" "Megan." Her expression tightened. "Why?" "I asked whether she cried after the party." Lauren didn't answer. I told her what Megan had said. She leaned against the wall and let out a breath. She was upset. She said she wasn't. She doesn't like confrontation. "That doesn't explain why you lied." "I didn't lie. I interpreted." That was a new one. I asked about the coworkers. She said she'd been frustrated and had exaggerated. I asked about telling people the house would be partly hers. She said she was speaking optimistically. Each answer was technically an answer. None of them meant anything. I told her I needed her to take the boxes back to her apartment. She didn't move. Instead, she said, "Eric called you, didn't he?" I didn't respond. She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. I knew he would make this weird. "He told me what you said." "He's always been jealous of our relationship?" Eric had been married for 8 years and spent most of his free time coaching his son's baseball team. If he was jealous, he hid it behind a very convincing commitment to lawn care. Lauren picked up the box labeled bathroom. "I'm putting this upstairs." I stepped in front of her. "No." She looked down at the box, then back at me. "You're serious?" "Yes." "This is unbelievable." "No. What's unbelievable is you showing up to move into my house after we never agreed on it. We've been together 2 years. That doesn't give you permission." She dropped the box. Something inside broke. We both heard it. Lauren stared at me, and for a moment I thought she might slap me. She didn't. She grabbed her purse and left the boxes where they were. I watched through the window as she got into her car. Then I changed the lock code. It was one of those keypad locks, and I should have changed it after the party. I hadn't because some part of me thought doing that would be dramatic. Looking back, I had a bad habit of calling basic precautions dramatic, whenever I didn't want to admit I was losing trust. Lauren called 20 minutes later. Her voice was calm. "Did you change the code?" "Yes. So I'm locked out." "You have an apartment." She hung up. That night, I packed the rest of her belongings into the boxes: clothes, makeup, a phone charger, 3 coffee mugs she'd bought, a stack of mail with her name on it. That last part bothered me. I looked through the envelopes. Nothing official. Catalogs, a gym promotion, a credit card offer, but all of them had my address. I texted her and asked why she was receiving mail at my house. She didn't answer. The next morning, I called the post office and asked what I needed to do to prevent someone from establishing residency at my address. The woman on the phone couldn't give legal advice, but she told me to mark the mail not at this address and return it. I also called a real estate attorney. That felt excessive until I explained the situation. He told me not to let Lauren move belongings into the house, not to accept rent, and to document that she maintained another residence. He said Ohio residency issues could become messy depending on the circumstances. I asked whether I was overreacting. He said, "People usually ask me that, right before describing something they should have reacted to sooner." Fair enough. I took photos of the boxes and sent Lauren a message telling her she could pick them up Saturday between noon and 2. I also said we needed to talk about whether the relationship was continuing. She replied 4 hours later, "You've made your choice clear." I wrote back that changing a door code wasn't ending the relationship. Her behavior was forcing us to discuss it. She sent a thumbs up. Saturday came. At noon, Lauren didn't show. At 1, nothing. At 2:15, I moved the boxes into the garage and left to meet Eric for lunch. While we were eating, my security camera sent an alert. Lauren was at the front door. She wasn't alone. Her father, Rick, stood behind her. Rick was a decent guy. Quiet, practical, usually more interested in college football than whatever emotional situation was happening nearby. Lauren tried the door code twice. Then she knocked. I spoke through the camera and told her I was out. She looked directly at the camera. "You said noon to 2. It's 2:30. My dad was late." Rick glanced at her. That told me something. I said I'd be home in 20 minutes. When I arrived, Lauren was sitting in her car. Rick stood near the garage. I opened it and showed him the boxes. He helped carry them to his truck. Lauren stayed in the car. When we finished, Rick asked whether he could talk to me privately. We walked to the edge of the driveway. He looked embarrassed. "I don't know what's going on between you two," he said, "but Lauren told us she's been paying toward this house for almost a year." I felt my stomach tighten. "She hasn't paid anything." "That's what I figured. Why?" He rubbed his jaw. "She asked us for money in January. Said you two were remodeling the basement and she needed to cover her share." I asked how much. $4,000. I must have looked surprised because he added, "Her mother and I thought it was an investment in your future." There had been no basement remodel. My basement still had concrete floors, exposed pipes, and a treadmill I'd used enough times to qualify as furniture. I asked whether Lauren had paid them back. Rick looked toward her car. "No." Then he told me there had been another request in April. $2,000 for new appliances. I had bought a dishwasher in April, with my own money. Lauren had sent her parents a photo of it. Rick apologized, though none of it was his fault. He asked me not to confront her while he was there because her mother had already been dealing with health issues, and he wanted to get Lauren home before things escalated. I agreed. As they drove away, Lauren looked through the passenger window at me. No wave, no expression, just a long stare. I went inside and sat at the kitchen table. For the first time, I wasn't wondering whether the relationship could be repaired. I was wondering how much I didn't know. I checked my credit report. Nothing looked wrong. I reviewed my bank accounts. No missing money. Then I searched through old emails and texts. I found little things I'd ignored. Lauren asking for photos of repair receipts. Lauren wanting copies of utility bills for budgeting. Lauren taking pictures of the new windows after I replaced them. At the time, I thought she was interested in the house. Now it looked like documentation. Around 7, Megan called. She sounded nervous. She said Lauren was at their parents' house and furious. Then she told me there was something else. Lauren had borrowed money from her too. $900. The reason? She said we were paying a lawyer to add her name to the deed. I asked Megan whether Lauren had ever mentioned when that was supposed to happen. After the wedding, she said. What wedding? There was silence. Then Megan said, very quietly, she told us you bought a ring. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I believed Lauren had some complicated legal plan to steal my house. I didn't. She wasn't running a criminal operation. She was doing something messier, and in some ways, harder to understand. She had built a version of our relationship for other people that didn't exist. In that version, we were basically engaged. She was investing in the house. She was helping renovate it. I was difficult and controlling, but she was patiently building a future with me anyway. The truth was less impressive. We talked vaguely about marriage. She stayed over on weekends. She bought pillows. By Sunday morning, I'd made up my mind. I texted Lauren and asked her to meet me at a coffee shop near her apartment. Public place, daytime. No access to my house. She agreed. I arrived early and sat near the window. Lauren came in 10 minutes late. Wearing a green sweater I'd given her for Christmas, she ordered coffee, sat across from me, and acted like we were there to negotiate a scheduling problem. I told her I knew about the money from her parents and Megan. Her face changed, but only for a second. Then she said, I was going to pay them back. That's not the issue. I didn't steal it. You lied about why you needed it. She took a sip of coffee. I needed help. With what? She looked out the window. Expenses. What expenses? She didn't answer. I asked again. Finally, she said she'd accumulated credit card debt. How much? About $18,000. I had no idea. She explained that her rent had increased. She'd had car repairs, and she'd spent more than expected on work events she hadn't been reimbursed for. Some of that may have been true, but $18,000 doesn't sneak up on you because of brake pads and appetizers. I asked why she hadn't told me. Because you judge people about money. I make budgets. You act like those are the same thing. I ignored that. I asked why she told people I was adding her to the deed. She said she believed I would, eventually. I asked about the ring. She said she'd found a browser tab open on my laptop. I had looked at rings months earlier. I'd also looked at kayaks and a smoker, large enough to feed a minor league baseball team. Browsing wasn't a contract. She said she took it as a sign. Then she told her family because she was excited. I asked why she borrowed money for legal fees that didn't exist. She started crying. A few people glanced over. I kept my voice low. Lauren said she felt trapped. She had debt, no savings, and no clear idea what she was doing with her life. Her friends were buying houses and having babies. Her younger sister was getting promoted. Meanwhile, Lauren was still renting and watching me build equity. I thought we were doing it together, she said. We weren't. I know that now. That was the first honest sentence of the conversation. She admitted she'd planned to move into the house and start contributing a few $100s a month. Then, after enough time passed, she thought I'd have to treat the property as shared. I asked whether that was why she'd started receiving mail there. She looked down. Yes. I sat back. She reached across the table and tried to touch my hand. I moved it. Lauren said she knew it looked bad, but that she hadn't intended to hurt me. She wanted security. She wanted to know the relationship was going somewhere. I told her the relationship was over. She started shaking her head before I finished. No. That response was so immediate, I almost didn't know what to say. Yes. You're angry. I am. We don't make permanent decisions angry. I'm not making it because I'm angry. She wiped her face and lowered her voice. You love me. I did. You still do. Maybe part of me did. That didn't matter. Love isn't a legal defense against reality. I told her she needed to repay her family and stop using my address. I also told her she wasn't allowed at my house without permission. She stared at me. Then she said, "You're going to regret this." It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. It sounded like certainty. She stood up, left her coffee, and walked out. I stayed another 10 minutes because I didn't want to meet her in the parking lot. When I got home, there were 14 missed calls. Most were from Lauren. 2 were from her mother. 1 was from an unknown number. I listened to the voicemail from her mother first. She said Lauren had told them I was throwing her out after she'd invested thousands into my home. I called Rick. He answered immediately. I explained the breakup and what Lauren had admitted. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he would handle his family. I appreciated that. But I told him I was documenting everything. He said he understood. The unknown number belonged to one of Lauren's coworkers, a woman named Paige. Her voicemail was short. "Hey, this is Paige. I think you should know Lauren's been telling people some things at work. Call me if you want. I'm not trying to get involved, but it's getting weird," called. Paige apologized several times before explaining. Lauren had told coworkers that I had financially controlled her for 2 years. She said I forced her to pay for repairs while refusing to put her name on the property. She also claimed I had locked her out of our house without warning. I asked whether anyone believed her. Paige hesitated. Some people do. That wasn't surprising. Lauren was good at telling stories. She remembered details, adjusted her tone, and knew exactly when to look reluctant. Paige said the story had started changing after the party. At first, Lauren said, I was just strict, then controlling, then financially abusive. By Monday, she was saying she might need a police escort to retrieve her belongings. I told Paige that Lauren had already collected everything with her father. She said she figured something was off. Then she sent me screenshots. There were messages from Lauren describing payments she'd supposedly made. $700 for windows, $1,200 for the dishwasher, $500 for paint. All false. There was also a photo of my house with the caption, 2 years of my money and work, and he thinks he can erase me with a door code. That night, I created a folder. Screenshots, bank records, receipts, security footage, messages confirming she lived at her apartment. I hated doing it. It made the relationship feel like evidence. For the next week, Lauren alternated between apologizing and attacking. Monday, she missed me. Tuesday, I had used her. Wednesday, she wanted closure. Thursday, she posted a quote about narcissists. Friday, she asked whether she could come over and get a casserole dish. I told her I'd leave it with Megan. She replied that I was being cruel. On Saturday morning, I woke up to pounding on my front door. Lauren stood outside with 2 police officers. She told them she lived there and that I had illegally locked her out. One officer asked whether we could speak privately. I showed him her apartment lease, security footage of her collecting boxes, and messages where she referred to my house as your place. The officers talked to Lauren for several minutes. Then they left. She stayed. She stood on the porch, staring through the glass. I told her through the door that she needed to go. She said, "You didn't have to make me look crazy." I said nothing. She left. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 nights later, my security camera caught someone walking around the side of my house at 1:12 in the morning. The person wore a hood, but I recognized the shoes. They were the white sneakers I'd bought Lauren for her birthday. I called the non-emergency police line and made a report. The officer who came out watched the footage twice. He asked whether Lauren had threatened me. I told him about the coffee shop comment, the police visit, and the messages. He said none of it was enough for an arrest, but he advised me to install another camera near the garage and keep documenting contact. The next morning, I found the side gate open. Nothing had been taken. That almost made it worse. If somebody steals a lawnmower, at least the motive is clear. Opening a gate at 1 a.m. is just a message. I texted Lauren once. I saw you on camera. Do not come onto my property again. Any further contact needs to be through email. She replied within a minute. Wasn't me. Then, you're paranoid. Then, this is exactly why we failed. I didn't answer. For 2 weeks, things quieted down. I went to work. I met Eric for dinner. I helped my dad replace a garbage disposal, which turned into 4 hours, because he refused to read the instructions on principle. I started feeling normal again. Then my supervisor called me into his office. Someone had emailed the company's general address, accusing me of financial abuse and harassment. The email didn't use Lauren's name. It described me as a project manager who used his income and property to control women. It said the company should consider whether someone like that belonged in management. My supervisor, Dan, looked uncomfortable. He'd known me 7 years. He said HR had to review it, but he wanted to hear my side. I showed him the police report and a few screenshots. Dan sighed and said, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this." The complaint went nowhere, but it changed something in me. Until then, I'd still thought of Lauren as hurt and panicking. Now she was trying to damage my job. I contacted an attorney. He sent her a formal no-contact letter and warned that further false statements could lead to legal action. Lauren responded by emailing me 11 pages. It wasn't 11 pages of anger. That would have been easier. It was a detailed account of our relationship, rewritten from the beginning. Every disagreement became control. Every boundary became punishment. Every time I paid for something became evidence that I wanted power. She described the party as an attempt to isolate her from friends. She described changing the door code as making her homeless. She described calling the police as asking for help. The document was calm, organized, and almost convincing. That scared me more than the late-night visit. She believed enough of it to keep going, or she needed to believe it. My attorney told me not to respond. A week later, Rick called. Lauren had been fired. Not because of me. She had used a company card for personal expenses and altered receipts to hide it. The amount was a little over $6,000. Her employer wasn't pressing charges yet, but they were demanding repayment. Rick said he and Lauren's mother had learned the full extent of her debt. It wasn't $18,000. It was closer to $37,000. She had personal loans, cash advances, unpaid taxes from freelance work, and money borrowed from at least 4 people. I asked why he was telling me. "Because she's blaming you," he said. Apparently, Lauren claimed the debt came from maintaining the lifestyle I expected. That made no sense. Most of our dates involved takeout, brewery patios, and watching football at Eric's house while his kids fired foam darts at us. Rick sounded exhausted. He said Lauren had moved back in with them. She had also started telling extended family that I'd promised to marry her and then abandoned her after taking her money. He asked whether I had anything in writing disproving it. I told him I had everything. Then, I asked him a question I'd been avoiding. Has she done something like this before? Rick didn't answer right away. Finally, he told me about a boyfriend Lauren had in college. They'd lived together for 8 months. After the breakup, Lauren accused him of keeping furniture she'd purchased. Her parents gave her money to replace it. Years later, they learned the furniture had belonged to him. There was also a former roommate who supposedly owed Lauren thousands in unpaid bills. Rick no longer knew whether that was true. He apologized again. I told him to stop apologizing for his adult daughter. We ended the call on decent terms. That should have been the final warning. Instead, Lauren escalated. The first sign was a credit alert. Someone had attempted to open a store card using my information. The application was denied because the address didn't match. I froze my credit and filed a report. I couldn't prove Lauren had done it, but the application used her apartment address. The police contacted her. She denied involvement. 2 days later, she showed up at my office parking lot. I was walking toward my truck when I saw her leaning against the driver's door. She looked thinner. Her hair was tied back, and she wore the green sweater again. For half a second, she looked like the woman I had met at a friend's cookout 2 years earlier. Then she said, "You sent the police to my parents' house." I reported fraud. You knew what that would do to my mom. You used my information. I was checking whether we could qualify together. We're not together. She looked around the parking lot. A few employees were leaving. Lauren stepped closer. You've turned everyone against me. I haven't talked to anyone except the people you involved. You talked to my dad. He called me. You talked to Paige. She called me. You always have an answer. I unlocked my truck, but didn't open the door. I told her she needed to leave. She started crying. Then she said she had nowhere to go. Her parents wanted her out. Her friends had stopped answering. She had no job. For a moment, I felt the old instinct to fix things. Find a number, make a plan, offer money. Then she said, "You did this to me." The instinct disappeared. I told her I was calling security. She grabbed my arm. Not hard. Just enough. I looked down at her hand. She let go. Security arrived before anything else happened. They escorted her off the property. I filed for a protective order the next morning. The hearing was 2 weeks later. Lauren appeared with an attorney her parents had paid for. She looked composed. Her lawyer argued that our contact was part of a difficult breakup and that Lauren had never threatened physical harm. My attorney presented the camera footage, police reports, workplace visit, attempted credit application, false complaint, and messages. The judge granted a temporary order. Lauren wasn't allowed near my home, workplace, or family. She also couldn't contact me directly, or through other people. As we left the courtroom, she looked at me across the hallway. There was no anger in her face, just disbelief. I think she honestly thought I would stop before it reached that point. That I'd protect her from consequences, even after I stopped protecting the relationship. For a month, the order worked. No calls, no messages, no visits. I replaced the side gate latch, changed every password, and installed better cameras. I also started seeing a therapist. Not because I thought I was falling apart. I wanted to understand why I had explained away so many things. The therapist asked me what I thought would happen if I called Lauren's behavior what it was. I told him I thought it would make me unfair. He said, "So you chose being fair to her over being honest with yourself. I didn't enjoy that sentence. It was accurate. The final incident happened on a Thursday evening. I was at Eric's house watching a basketball game when my phone showed a camera alert. Smoke filled the image near my garage. I called 911 and drove home. By the time I arrived, firefighters had put out a small fire beside the garage door. Someone had piled cardboard against the wall and lit it. The siding melted. Part of the frame burned. It could have spread to the garage. My camera caught a car stopping near the alley. The plate wasn't clear. But another camera showed the driver stepping out. Lauren. She was arrested at her parents' house that night. Police found a gas can in her trunk, along with printed photos of my house and copies of the email she'd sent my employer. She was charged with violating the protective order, attempted arson, and identity-related fraud connected to the credit application. I didn't see her again until court. She accepted a plea agreement. She received probation, mandatory treatment, restitution, and a longer protective order. She also spent several months in county jail because of the fire and the violation. Rick sent me one email afterward. He said Lauren was finally admitting she needed help. He didn't ask me to forgive her. I appreciated that. I sold the house the following spring. Not because I was afraid to stay there. I was just done having every room connected to an argument. I bought a smaller place closer to work, with a fenced yard and no guest room. That last part was not an accident. About a year later, I started dating someone named Hannah. We met through Eric and his wife. Hannah is a physical therapist, wakes up early, hates large parties, and asks before taking the last sparkling water from my refrigerator. The first time she stayed over, she left a sweater on the back of a chair. The next morning, she picked it up and said, "I'll take this so it doesn't look like I'm slowly moving in." I laughed harder than the joke deserved. She asked why. I told her the shorter version. Not all of it. Not then. We've been together almost a year now. She has a key. We talked about it first. That probably sounds like a small thing. It isn't. The last lesson I took from Lauren wasn't that people can lie or that boundaries matter. I already knew both of those things. It was that a boundary is useless when you keep negotiating it with someone who only hears "not yet." Lauren didn't take over my house in one night. She did it in small claims: a drawer, a key, a party, a piece of mail, a story told to someone else. Every time I avoided conflict, she treated the silence as permission. By the time I finally said no in a way she believed, she had already built an entire life around the idea that I would eventually give in. I didn't. And that's what she never forgave.